Could our amazing planet be a hidden conscious being? Discover the transformative truth revealed. Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel as the sun sank beyond the horizon, melting into a blend of crimson and indigo. Thoughts raced through her mind, tumultuous and jarring, each one drenched in the weight of expectation and confinement. Back in her hometown, she felt like an invisible thread in a fabric woven tight with conformity and tradition. She recalled the scornful looks from the school board, the dismissal of her innovative teaching methods. No one understood her passion for coupling science with environmental consciousness. At 38, she wasn't just battling for her ideas. She was wrestling against the incessant insistence of her family's expectations, their collective sighs echoing in her mind, a reminder that she needed to conform. Pulling into her childhood driveway, Sarah's heart stirred at the sight of the old ranch. It held bits of her past, but they felt trapped beneath layers of habit and resignation. As she stepped out, she noticed something glimmering in the fading light, a weathered rock wall behind the barn, covered in ancient Native American symbols. Her breath caught in her throat. There it was, a connection to something larger than herself, something that resonated within her very soul. Each symbol seemed to whisper, imploring her to seek their wisdom. Yet doubts niggled at her. Could she really challenge her surroundings? Before she could answer, memories of her progressive lessons flared in her mind, lessons that made students bright-eyed with curiosity. With the support of a few supportive students, she had introduced sustainability practices in the classroom, fostering an appreciation of their land and its history. But the district had called those approaches frivolous, and the arrogance of those established in the system crushed her spirit. Could science and spirit coexist? The thought sent ripples of unease through her. Just when shadows felt thickest, her phone buzzed. A message from her former mentor, a brilliant scientist ousted for challenging the status quo. "Sarah, we need to talk," it read. Her heart raced. He was one of the few who believed in merging science with spirit. This could be her lifeline, but the distance between the ideals they shared and the skepticism of her peers felt insurmountable. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With newfound vigor, Sarah began crafting visual presentations that ignited the spark of curiosity in her students, the reluctant agglomeration of facts and colors. Their laughter filled the air, but doubts clawed at her insides. Would this passion prove more than a fleeting moment? Could she shatter expectations that had shaped her existence? The day arrived when she stood before the school board, defending her ideas. Their scorn felt like a heavy weight as whispers of laughter echoed in her ears. The skepticism hurt. It was an outright rejection of her truth. Why was her insatiable curiosity perceived as a handicap? Fists clenched at her side, she wrestled with a gnawing frustration mixed with despair. Caught in this tidal wave of doubt, Sarah confronted the haunting question. Could her truth breach the sturdy walls of tradition that stood before her? As murmurings circulated through the boardroom, she sensed the tension crystallize in the air between the static of her upbringing and the hopes she clung to fiercely. The stakes were rising and she was teetering on the edge. The echoes of their laughter reverberated within her as she braced for the impossible. What would she ignite in her community if they could ever catch a flicker of her vision? The air in the boardroom hung thick with disbelief, and Sarah felt each gaze pierce through her defenses. The weight of her convictions pressed against her chest, halting her breaths as anxiety threatened to immobilize her. She had prepared tirelessly, refining her arguments and assembling data like a scientist in her lab, but all she felt now was the throbbing pulse of uncertainty. "Ms. Jennings," the superintendent interrupted, his tone slick with condescension. "You speak of combining science with spirituality as if they were equal partners in a dance. But science is grounded in tangible evidence. Can you present findings that support your unconventional methods?" The challenge hit her like a sharp knife. My core belief is rooted in interconnectedness, she began, forcing the words out despite the tremor in her voice. Teaching our children about sustainability isn't frivolous. It's essential. We need to prepare them for a reality where they acknowledge their role in preserving this planet. She felt a flicker of defiance ignite beneath the surface, and that flicker pulled her out of the depths of doubt, if only for a moment. A collective gasp echoed from the assembly, followed by hushed whispers. They had labeled her as an outcast, yet now they were listening if only to critique. In that moment, her former mentoress words echoed back. Do not shy away from challenging the rigidity of tradition. Remind them of the beauty of asking why. Sarah steadied her gaze on the group. We're at a critical junction in our history. Igniting passion for environmental stewardship in students fosters not just knowledge, but responsibility and empathy. Still, resistance remained thick in the air, as palpable as the heat emanating from the overhead lights. And what results have you seen from this unorthodox curriculum? Another board member responded, skepticism lacing her voice. A chill crept into Sarah's veins, the edge of doubt rising again. It twisted within her, clawing at her enthusiasm. Yet, suddenly, she recalled the names of students who had connected with her vision, the smiles reflecting a true engagement with learning beyond test scores. I can't quantify the heart, she replied, rallying herself against the current. But I can tell you about Maria, a student who has become so passionate about our local ecosystem that she started a community garden project. She is not alone. Others have joined her. That is the outcome I believe in. It's transformative. The clustered members of the school board exchanged glances, their expressions lifting momentarily from steel resolve to a fraction of intrigue. Could her passion actually plant seeds of change in their rigid approach? Yet, a wave of regret washed over her as well. Amid the battle, she felt the loss of something deeper. Would she lose herself in this fight, or could she grow alongside her aspirations? The implicit weight of her family's expectations nagged at her insides, combating with her newfound determination. How could she stand firm in her beliefs when her own roots were still tangled in doubt? The meeting adjourned, and as she stepped out of the room, Sarah found herself enveloped in uncertainty. She longed for clarity, for a path that felt both authentic and rewarding. She caught the shimmering symbols behind the barn in the corner of her mind. Their wisdom beckoned her. That night, she lay in bed, thoughts swirling around her. A sudden realization crept into her consciousness. She was not just challenging the board, but also seeking to challenge her own limitations. It was time for her to delve deeper, not only into the realms of science and spirituality, but her own identity. What truths lay in her past that could guide her? The following morning, as dawn broke, she grabbed her notebook and headed outside, determined to explore the meanings behind the symbols, and perhaps discover parts of herself buried in the rich soil of her history. Yet, as she reached the weathered wall, a pulse of fear gripped her. What if, in confronting her heritage, she unearthed more than she was prepared to handle? The ancient symbols flickered in her mind like a warning. The moment of truth loomed ahead, a revelation waiting to unfold. Would she have the courage to face both her past and what that could mean for her future? As Sarah approached the faded symbols etched into the weathered wall, a blend of trepidation and anticipation coursed through her veins. Each step felt weighted, as if the very earth beneath her feet was holding its breath. The sun broke through the canopy of trees above, casting mottled shadows that danced eerily along the ground. Here was where science brushed against the ethereal, where thoughts could teeter on the edge of revelation. She set down her notebook and, taking a deep breath, examined the symbols. They resembled a language she had learned long ago but could never fully grasp. Intricate swirls blended with shapes that echoed life. Leaves, droplets of water, and even animal forms. In this simplicity lay deep complexity, representing connections she yearned to understand, not just about the world, but herself. What had once seemed like mere drawings now radiated energy. With her heart pounding, Sarah opened her notebook, the empty pages before her inviting yet terrifying. Her hand hovered over the paper, a lifetime of thoughts swirling in her mind. What if she allowed herself to write not only of her dreams for the students' futures but of the very roots of her identity? Why am I afraid? She questioned herself quietly, pushing the rough edges of doubt aside. Fear of inadequacy? Fear of the unknown? She realized how much time she had spent externalizing the journey of discovery, pouring energy into her curriculum, while neglecting her personal evolution in the process. Her fingers began to scrawl thoughts furiously. Why did sustainability matter to her? Was it merely a professional passion, or something deeper? She remembered afternoons spent in her grandmother's garden, the scent of herbs mixing with the damp earth, a time when she felt truly alive. As she penned those memories, she felt a cue of strength stirring. It connected her to the past, anchoring her in the present. Suddenly, the ground trembled slightly beneath her. The shift caught her off guard, the urge to dismiss it as merely imagination bubbling up. Yet, she recognized that this moment held significance. It was as if the very essence of the earth echoed her internal struggles, whispering not just about the interconnectedness she preached but the very fabric of existence itself. With renewed determination, she envisioned a lesson plan that would blend her personal history with her curriculum. Students could learn not only facts about environmental science, but could also explore emotional ties to nature, stories intertwined with experience, forming a new understanding of stewardship. Perhaps she could even instill in them the wisdom carried through generations, embracing both the knowledge of science and the whispers of ancient truths. As she continued writing, she felt the symbols before her vibrate with life, resonating with the evolving narrative of her own journey. She was not merely up against the skepticism in the boardroom but facing a deeper internal conflict. To bridge the past and the future, spirituality and science. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves and pulling her thoughts back to the present. She paused, staring at the symbols again, then glanced back at her notebook. It felt as if something greater was unfolding, and she had caught just a glimpse of its form. There was more to uncover, both in the world around her and within herself. Yet a new awareness prickled at her consciousness. What if the board's resistance was not just an external barrier? What if it reflected her own fears of being wholly seen, wholly vulnerable in her beliefs? The thought sent a chill down her spine, compelling her to consider the sacrifices she might have to make in pursuit of her vision. With the sun setting and shadows creeping in, she closed her notebook, the weight of her revelations heavy yet promising. She needed to take this newfound understanding back to the board to face her opponents not just with passion but with authenticity and raw truth. Would she find the courage to stand her ground, defend her vision, and confront the very essence of who she was becoming? As she turned to leave, a stirring flicker in the corner of her eye caught her attention. Glancing back at the symbols, she whispered a vow. She would unearth all parts of herself, whether they were daunting or freeing. The fear would be a part of her journey, but it would not define her. And as she walked away, the wind picked up again, carrying a whisper that suggested she had only just begun. What lay ahead? The time had come to confront both the board and her own limitations. Would she rise to the challenge or falter under the weight of her own aspirations? Dawn broke with a rippling glow that melted the horizons, and Sarah stood at her window, absorbing a world awash with new possibilities. The symbols had ignited something within her that transcended doubt and fear. They felt like keys to hidden chambers of understanding. She was poised on the brink of transformation, yet the weight of the task ahead loomed larger than life. As she poured herself a steaming cup of coffee, her mind raced with intricate lesson plans. The vision she had begun to sculpt required clarity. The students needed to feel the pulse of both ecological science and their personal connection to nature, the unshakable ties that bind humanity to the earth. Today was not just another day at the school board. It was a crucible of opportunity where she would lay bare her heart and soul before them. Her stomach fluttered with anticipation, and she wrestled with the gnawing tension. Each moment that ticked by felt like a reinforcement of her own resilience. Moving purposefully through her home, she imagined the classroom alive with discussions about not just facts, but emotion, stories that entwined their lives with those of the mountains, rivers, and trees. Yet the deeper she delved into her thoughts, another voice emerged from the shadows of doubt. What if they don't understand? It hissed, raising specters of previous encounters where skepticism crushed her ideals. She could hear the dismissive tones of board members echoing in her ears. Their skepticism was not merely dismissive. It bore the weight of power and fear of change. She had encountered it before, and today she would confront it again. In the hour before her meeting, she meticulously reviewed her notes, infusing them with her newfound insights and personal history. The memory of her grandmother's garden bloomed vividly in her mind, guiding her choices even now. If she could channel the essence of those afternoons, those lessons of nurturing life and celebrating the interconnected web of existence, then perhaps she could weave that into her presentation. As she glimpsed her reflection in the mirror, she caught sight of a flicker of that determined woman who spent countless hours educating and advocating for sustainability. An internal shift felt palpable. She was no longer just a facilitator of information. Sarah had become a bridge, a channel for her students to explore a deeper significance, a blend of the scientific and the spiritual that was at the core of her beliefs. Arriving at the boardroom, the air was thick with formality, the rectangular table a barrier between her aspirations and the collective sway of judgment. Each board member wore a mask of indifference, their eyes more focused on numbers and graphs than the human experiences she planned to share. Sarah took a deep breath, channeling the energy she had felt at the symbols wall. Imagine a lesson where students don't just learn about ecosystems, but connect with them emotionally. She began, her voice steady yet laced with urgency. What if we encouraged them to share their stories, their histories? A murmur rippled through the room, and she sensed an opening, a crack in the defense. She pressed on, blending scientific insights with personal narratives about her formative encounters with nature and its profound impact on her identity. But resistance remained palpable. One member leaned forward, skepticism morphing into confrontation. And what about the measurable outcomes we need to focus on? His voice cut through her momentum like ice water. Her heart raced at the challenge. The confrontation was no longer just external. She felt the echo of her self-doubt creeping back in, but she refused to bow to it. What we measure, she replied, thoughts solidifying into precision, should expand beyond facts and figures. We must understand the feelings tied to our environment. After all, true stewardship requires more than knowledge. It demands passion. The flickers of interest from some members sparked hope, but she noticed others still guarded. Sarah's gaze traced those distant expressions, understanding that she was not just battling their skepticism. This was a pivotal moment in her journey, demanding that she confront the parts of herself that still hesitated, unsure of her own worthiness. The room felt charged as she pressed forward, igniting an internal fire that demanded to be seen. Could she not only represent a progressive vision but also embrace the vulnerability that came with it? Thank you for your time, she concluded, her voice a blend of resolve and yearning. I urge you to consider what it means for our students not just academically, but personally to engage in this dialogue. Leaving the boardroom, she felt an unfamiliar pulse of exhilaration mixed with dread. The reality was still unfolding, radiating into uncertain territories and potential confrontations. What lay ahead? Would the board members embrace her vision, or would they question her legitimacy? The moment of truth was breathing down her neck, and deep down, she sensed she was just beginning to scratch the surface of her own evolution. As she walked away, the quiet echo of that earlier vow resonated within her. She would confront the unknown and embrace the learning journey ahead. Would the difficult truths she was confronting turn out to be the catalysts for growth she desperately needed? The day curled into afternoon, shadows lengthening across the path as Sarah left the boardroom, uncertainty dancing behind her. Each step was a testament to her growing resolve. The echoes of the yesterday's debate lingered in her mind, particularly the skepticism she faced. But, unlike the past, this time she felt different. A seed had been planted, and she could sense it pushing through the soil of self-doubt, yearning for sunlight. She returned home, the familiar walls embracing her with a comforting sense of familiarity. Yet, within that cocoon, her heart raced. Could she really shift the educator's perspective? She heard the critical question posed in the meeting, "What about measurable outcomes?" A chill coursed through her. It carried the weight of her own uncertainties. Were her aspirations misguided? Was her vision really viable? Restlessness ignited in her gut, and she pushed through the door of her garden, a sanctuary cultivated with her grandmother's lessons. She knelt beside a blooming petunia, observing its vibrant colors and the soft hum of bees flitting around. Nature had always been a refuge for her, a reminder that life thrived in the spaces of resilience and connection. Wasn't that what she wanted for her students? A lesson that transcended the sterile confines of rigid metrics? As she worked the soil, she pondered her next steps. The board's resistance was but a challenge, a test of her commitment. She grabbed a trowel and began planting new flowers, envisioning it as a metaphor for her proposed curriculum. Each flower would represent different emotions tied to nature, from joy and serenity to responsibility and stewardship. They would flourish because of personal investment, just as her students would if they connected with their lessons on an emotional level. That night, Sarah spread her notes across the dining table, determined to refine her proposal. She found herself engrossed in the stories she wanted to present. Tales of riverbanks worn smooth by currents, the aching roots of ancient trees, the splendor of wildflowers defying the starkness of rocks. These images spiraled in her mind, intertwining her scientific knowledge and heartfelt experiences. Then her phone blinked, casting an artificial light in the dimness. A message from a fellow teacher asking about her board presentation. A wave of vulnerability crashed over her. What if her peers perceived her ambition as naive? Inwardly, she wrestled with the impulse to pacify the naysayers, to present a sanitized version of the truth. But would that serve the students? Suddenly, it clicked. Her mission was not just to enlighten her colleagues but to inspire them. She had to convey her unyielding belief that education could ignite passion and deeper connections to Earth. What she was proposing was more than lessons. It was about cultivating stewards for the future. Each individual's report card should reflect growth, both as a learner and a human being. The next morning found her standing boldly in front of her colleagues once more. The boardroom felt different today, electric and charged with her sustained determination. Her breath steadied, the fears of inadequacy peeling away with each passing moment. "Let us redefine success," she began, her voice rising confidently. "Imagine if we measured not just test scores, but heartbeats, a reflection of passion, growth, and authenticity." An eyebrow raised here and there. She began to see her allies forming, the creaking shift of those long-rooted defenses. Yet, lingering skepticism remained, and she was resolute this was merely the beginning. Her heart pounded as she prepared her next move, eyeing the decision-makers who bore the weight of tradition. Returning home that evening, she felt exhausted but exhilarated. She had embraced discomfort, battled internal voices, and presented her truth. But deep down, she recognized that this was an ongoing journey, one that may require more than she initially anticipated. She needed to shift paradigms, not just among her colleagues but within herself as well. The realization pulsed through her. Confrontation awaited, not with other people but with a deeper understanding of herself. How much was she willing to risk for her beliefs? Would she press on, even when faced with daunting challenges? As she gazed at the roots of the petunias she had planted, she recognized that growth often comes from discomfort. The journey had just begun, and she felt it, a swell of possibilities unspooling before her like the vines of a climbing plant seeking new heights. The real question loomed large in her mind. How would she balance these transformative ideas within the rigorous frameworks of academia? Morning light filtered through her bedroom window, the warm hues inviting her to wakefulness. But beneath the surface of that gentle light lay tumultuous thoughts. Sarah tossed aside the sheets, her heart racing as she contemplated the journey ahead. The stakes were high, and she still grappled with the same questions that had haunted her the day before. How could she implement her vision within the rigid structures of education that seemed designed to stifle creativity? Breakfast was a hurried affair, a lackluster meal of toast and coffee that did little to ignite her enthusiasm. Each bite was tinged with doubt, echoing virtues of compliance and safety. Yet, She remembered the petunias. Each blossoming flower reminded her of the emotional and intellectual richness she wanted to cultivate in her classroom. A surge of determination rippled through her, a reminder that small, tough blooms could flourish in stark soil. Armed with her revised proposal, she approached the school with a newfound focus. The air felt charged as she navigated the familiar hallways, her mind racing with strategies. She needed to engage her colleagues, but how could she do so without alienating those who clung to their established methods? Internalizing the clash of ideologies stirred a restlessness deep in her chest. During the day, she sought opportunities to share snippets of her vision, weaving in conversations naturally within the rhythms of routines. What if we designed a lesson around the interconnectedness of ecosystems? She asked one of her colleagues during lunch. She studied their reaction, reading the skepticism etched on their expressions with care. Some were intrigued, others dismissive, and one particularly defensive. Yet, each reaction provided insight. The faces that crinkled into frowns illuminated the invisible boundaries of their own apprehension. As the week unfurled, Sarah began to draft a comprehensive workshop designed to foster discussion among her peers. She envisioned an interactive session that could flip conventional metrics on their head. How could she facilitate introspection and challenge assumptions? With every detail, every exercise she planned, the image of her students sipping from the cup of curiosity motivated her. Each afternoon, she returned to the sanctuary of her garden, burying herself in the rich soil as a means of escape and reflection. With every handful of earth she sifted, she felt a sense of urgency wash over her. Would her colleagues listen? Would they truly allow the idea of integrating emotional intelligence into learning to take root? One evening, deeply immersed in her notes, Sarah stumbled upon a personal story, a memory from her childhood, when her teacher had taken them outside to learn about the environment. It became a catalyst, fueling her proposal with real-life consequences. If she could replicate that experience, create similar moments of wonder in her classroom, what impact would that have? The idea crystallized. She would tell the story of why these changes were essential, grounding her vision in both empirical data and emotional truth. During her workshop, she would share personal anecdotes that illustrated the profound effects of connection, how a simple lesson in nature opened gateways in her own understanding. But self-doubt crept back in as she rehearsed her speech late into the night. Was she equipped to handle pushback? What if her colleagues questioned her authority? She knew she needed allies, but would they emerge when she stood beneath the uncomfortable spotlight? The day of the workshop arrived. Apprehension knotted her stomach like a vice. As she set up the space, she glanced around, taking in the atmosphere. With every passing moment, she felt a mixture of exhilaration and impending dread. As the first participants filed in, Sarah straightened her back and welcomed them with a genuine smile. This was her moment, a synthesis of all the effort and vulnerability she had invested. But deep within, uncertainty flickered. Could she engage her colleagues sufficiently to foster transformative change? Would they embrace her vision, or would the familiar boundaries keep them anchored to the past? The question lingered like the scent of fresh earth in her garden, waiting to bloom. The workshop room buzzed with hesitant chatter as Sarah glanced at the assembled colleagues. Their personal stakes were unspoken but palpable, each one navigating their own way through a conservative educational landscape. She had imagined this moment countless times, yet reality felt more daunting than she had anticipated. As the participants settled into their chairs, Sarah took a deep breath, centering herself. The story she had crafted about her childhood memory danced through her mind, a lantern guiding her through the uncertainty. She charged forward, ready to share her vision, but the fatigue of fear weighed heavily on her shoulders. What if this effort fell flat? The thought lingered, but she smothered the whisper of self-doubt as she began. "Thank you all for being here," she started, her voice steadier than she felt. "Today, I want to explore how integrating emotional intelligence and environmental education can reshape our classroom experiences." Connecting the personal to the professional, she recounted that fateful day in school when nature transformed her understanding of learning. Gradually, she began to see intrigue spark among her colleagues, small nods of recognition, The language she used felt like a bridge, inviting their thoughts instead of drowning them in theory. Imagine a classroom where students don't just memorize facts but engage vividly with the material, developing empathy and connection to the world around them. As the session unfurled, participants shared their experiences. Some spoke of feeling trapped by rigidity, while others admitted to longing for a more meaningful connection with their students. Voices emerged layered with both support and skepticism. The interplay of reactions punctuated her presentation, pulling her deeper into a dialogue she had craved. It was during a particularly fervent discussion that she felt the tide turn. A colleague, resolute in her resistance, challenged, "But can you truly measure that kind of learning? Isn't it just another trend that distracts from core objectives?" The question stung, resonating with her own insecurities. Yet, within the discomfort lay an opportunity. What if we redefine our objectives? Sarah proposed, her heart racing. Instead of focusing solely on test scores, can we include emotional growth and environmental stewardship in our discussions of success? Encounters that provoke thought, questions that cultivate curiosity? These two hold immense value in shaping our students. The colleague leaned back, contemplation flickering in her eyes. The others rippled with uncertainty, each processing the challenge to firmly held beliefs. Just then, the subtle shift Sarah sought emerged. As though the air lightened, a discussion erupted about different methods of assessment, and possibilities unfolded like petals before fresh rain. Her heart soared as voices intermingled, drawing her colleagues together. But as the conversation swayed and swirled with potential, a gnawing thought burrowed into her mind. Was this moment merely ephemeral? Could these tentative shifts sustain beyond the confines of her workshop? As they wrapped up, Sarah felt a swell of optimism while also grappling with the nebulous tension ahead. She knew the real work would begin now. Collaborating with those less enthusiastic would demand patience, courage, and unwavering commitment. How to unite divergent perspectives. Each doubt resurfaced, steering her thoughts toward the potential obstacles ahead. After a few participants approached her, expressing interest in further discussions, Sarah's spirits lifted, but her mind remained burdened. What strategies could she employ to maintain momentum? How could she deepen the engagement of those still anchored to the old ways of teaching? The questions surged, resting her thoughts. This wasn't an end, it was the starting point of a meticulously uncomfortable journey. A thread of determination wove through her heart as she readied herself to navigate the challenges ahead. Outside her window, the petunias swayed in the afternoon breeze. Their vibrant colors a stark reminder of resilience. Yet doubts dogged her. Had she laid the groundwork for true transformation, or was this just the beginning of a more arduous climb? A new challenge loomed, demanding focus and creativity. It was time to confront not just her colleagues' hesitations, but her own fear of failure. Could she transform her workshop's spark into a blazing trail that led them all beyond familiar territory? How far could her vision reach before hitting those formidable walls once more? The days following the workshop blurred into a whirlwind of reflections and plans. Sarah spent her mornings sifting through feedback forms, each scrawl a beacon of engagement or resistance. The encouraging responses fueled her resolve, while the critical ones lingered like shadows, whispers of doubt that taunted her resolve. In the quiet solitude of her classroom, Sarah began mapping out actionable plans. She envisioned small pilot projects that could implement the ideas discussed, concrete steps to transform theoretical insights into palpable experiences. Yet, as determined as she was, those nagging questions about commitment loomed larger. How could she ensure that her colleagues actively participated? Was she equipped to lead them through the inevitable struggles that would arise? She felt drawn back into introspection, wrestling with the possibility that her enthusiasm might not be enough to shift deeply ingrained beliefs. One morning, as she sat at her cluttered desk with a steaming cup of coffee, an email notification flashed on her screen. It was from the resistant colleague who had posed that biting question during her workshop. Sarah's heart raced as she clicked it open. To her surprise, the colleague expressed gratitude for the conversation, admitting it had prompted her to rethink her methods. She requested a meeting to discuss the possibility of collaborating on a project, intrigued by the concept of emotional intelligence in the curriculum. This small thread of hope pulled at Sarah, igniting a flicker of optimism. Yet as excitement coursed through her veins, another voice emerged, reminding her of the trials that lay ahead. Was this newfound interest genuine, or merely a passing phase? How would she keep the momentum alive, especially with those who remained uninterested or skeptical? The meeting with her colleague felt like standing on a precipice, ready to leap into the unknown. Sarah laid out her vision for the collaborative project, structuring it around themes of empathy and environmental awareness. She felt her confidence surge as she spoke, each word piercing the veil of doubt that had clouded her thoughts. What if, she proposed, we incorporate service learning components? Engaging students in hands-on projects could provide them the opportunity to connect with their community while exploring these vital themes. Her colleague nodded thoughtfully, the glimmer of interest now more evident. They brainstormed ideas together, the atmosphere transforming from the initial skepticism to eager collaboration. Yet, even as they crafted a plan, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the real challenge lay ahead, not just from their discussions, but in translating this enthusiasm into sustainable action. As they wrapped up, strategies began to form, but so did doubts. Would they face pushback when presenting this new approach to others? How could they persuade the other faculty members entrenched in traditional methods? Determination settled over Sarah as she realized this could be an opportunity not just for her colleagues but for herself as well. She had begun to tap into her leadership potential, something she hadn't fully recognized within herself. Yet, the upcoming faculty meeting loomed ahead, a daunting battleground where resistance could easily crumple their budding plans. Would she be able to articulate her vision compellingly enough to inform others while addressing their concerns and motivations? As she prepared her presentation, the once vibrant threads of hope twisted with the weight of uncertainty. The lines between possibility and fear blurred in her mind, and she grappled with a new revelation: this journey wasn't solely about championing ideas. It was about assertively facing the inevitable clash of perspectives. With everything at stake, Sarah sat at her desk, a wave of resolve washing over her. The moment of truth stared back at her, fueling her determination to push through her fears. Would she transform her vision into action, or would she falter in the face of skepticism? The meeting beckoned, and she felt the tension rise. Soon, she would have the chance to discover if her burgeoning leadership could indeed bridge the gap between old and new. How far could she stretch her courage as she stepped into that room filled with doubt and uncertainty? The sunlight poured through the classroom windows, casting elongated shadows onto the floor where Sarah paced nervously, rehearsing her presentation in her mind. Each step felt like a countdown to the moment she had both anticipated and dreaded. She had spent the last 2 days refining her talking points, focusing on the potential benefits of their proposed project. The weight of responsibility loomed heavily. This was not merely about conveying a set of ideas. This was an opportunity to ignite change. As the meeting hour approached, her stomach churned with a mix of anticipation and fear. Would her colleagues respond positively, or would their skepticism snuff out her spark before it could catch fire? She glanced at her carefully prepared slides, vibrant visuals filled with imagery of engaged students and flourishing community projects. But in the background of those images, a voice echoed louder than the rest: what if it wasn't enough? When Sarah entered the faculty lounge, she found a mix of familiar faces, some eager, others indifferent. The room buzzed with fragmented conversations, and she felt the space contract under the weight of historical biases and entrenched practices. Was she truly ready to disrupt the status quo? She reminded herself of the small flicker of interest from her colleague, the constructive exchanges they had shared. Yet doubt clawed at her. As the meeting commenced, her colleagues took their places, settling in with the comfort of routine. The principal introduced the agenda, and soon it was Sarah's turn. Heart pounding, she approached the front, the spotlight feeling more like a magnifying glass. Taking a deep breath, she opened her presentation, allowing the visuals to transform into a captivating narrative. Today, I want us to explore a new way of learning, one rooted in empathy and community engagement. She began, her voice steadier than she felt. For a moment, she allowed her passion for the ideas to seep through. Expounding on service learning, she painted a picture of students immersed in the community, reflecting on their experiences and practicing emotional intelligence. As she spoke, she noticed expressions shift. Nods of tentative approval from a few, skeptical furrows from others. A trusted mentor chimed in, questioning the practicality of implementation and the potential backlash from parents. Sarah steeled herself. Those concerns are valid, and it's crucial that we address them. I believe that by involving parents early and showcasing positive outcomes, we can build trust around these new initiatives. The tension in the room softened, if only slightly. Increasingly, questions arose, but they weren't dismissive. Instead, they paved the way for discussions that almost felt collaborative. Wheelhouse ideas began forming, ones that intertwined community values with student learning. The dialogue flowed, buoyed by Sarah's conviction. It became a collective exploration rather than a reticent critique. Yet, amid the growing acceptance, Sarah's inner voice grappled with a nagging thought. This was but one meeting. Would this initial enthusiasm transfer to tangible change when they faced logistical challenges and skepticism from others not present? How would she sustain this momentum beyond a single discussion? As the meeting neared its conclusion, her mentor offered an unexpected endorsement. Sarah's right. This could very well lead us into a new realm of teaching, he declared, the room buzzing with a mix of excitement and skepticism. A veil of possibility felt tangible, but Sarah knew they were only at the starting line. Walking back to her desk after the meeting, a sense of elation coursed through her, tempered by the awareness of impending obstacles. She had begun to reshape her narrative as a leader, but the journey toward real change was just beginning. A momentary victory might inspire, but sustaining it would require a more structured approach. In her mind, lists began to form strategies for communication, building alliances, addressing resistance. But beneath that flicker of hope, yet another doubt arose. Would she have the strength to remain resilient, to be the anchor through turbulent waters that were sure to come? The echo of the meeting lingered, propelling her forward but also immersing her deeper into the challenge. As she faced her reflections, one undeniable truth emerged. She was on a path that demanded an unwavering commitment. The thought of navigating through resistance filled her with an anxious thrill, but she was prepared to confront it. The real test awaited her. Soon she would have the chance to initiate follow-up conversations with other faculty members, ones who were less inclined to embrace change. Would this optimism remain unscathed, or would inertia swiftly drag her back? The answers were shrouded in the fog of uncertainty. Yet, as her resolve solidified, it became clear. The time had come to face herself and her colleagues in their entirety. Would she emerge transformed, or would the shadows of doubt prevail? As twilight settled in, Sarah stood at the threshold of her hometown school, an unmistakable force buzzing within her. The anticipation that had once skittishly accompanied her into the boardroom now fueled her with unwavering determination. Her workshops had sparked interest, and she now envisioned a vibrant blend of education and environmental stewardship blossoming from her efforts. This tangible idea was no longer just a dream. It was within her grasp. Months earlier, the thought of merging emotional intelligence with education seemed an insurmountable challenge. Yet, here she was emboldened and recognized as an instigator of transformation, not merely in herself but in her colleagues. She knew the battle against complacency and skepticism was far from over, but today felt like a turning point. The seeds she had planted were beginning to break through the soil of doubt. Sarah breathed deeply. Recalling the symbols etched into the weathered wall by the barn, the echoes of nature intertwined with her own identity now felt clear and pronounced. She had not only found her voice, but her place within a community that would benefit from the lessons of empathy, connection, and responsibility that she felt so passionately about. Today, she would present her refined proposal to the school board, where her journey began and where it could once again be shaped. Walking into the boardroom, she felt a wave of recognition wash over her, not of the spirit-crushing dismissal she had once faced, but a palpable sense of hope. Colleagues who once wore skepticism like armor now leaned forward, intrigued. The conversations that had unfolded in her workshops had brought them to this moment, and she was ready to embrace the potential on the table. "Thank you all for being here today," Sarah began, her voice steady. "What we have witnessed together is the power of storytelling and place-based education. I believe we stand at the brink of a new understanding of what it means to teach our children. We have the opportunity to intertwine our local environment with our curriculum, creating not just knowledgeable students but passionate stewards of our community." As she presented her vision, the imagery on her slides painted a comprehensive picture of emotionally engaged learning, a landscape weaving through gardens, rivers, and local ecosystems, highlighting individual stories of growth. She shared anecdotes of students who had thrived under her guidance, recounting tales of Maria and others who had transformed their learning environments into sanctuaries of curiosity and care. The board members shifted in their seats. Sarah could feel the temperature of the room change as awareness began to seep through. Listening to her was no longer compelled by obligation but rather inspired by possibility. Questions began to emerge, but they were no longer accusatory. Discussions swirled, looking at the potential implications for student engagement and community involvement, resonating with the goals of holistic education. And as we consider this, Sarah pressed forward confidently, we must also confront the tangible outcomes. Our students' emotional development, cultivating empathy, resilience, and stewardship will translate into measurable successes, yielding not just individual growth but community enrichment. Moments later, the superintendent, initially a known skeptic, leaned forward with an unexpected smile. "This is an ambitious yet necessary vision, Sarah. But how do we ensure that the momentum carries through the rest of the academic year?" At that moment, realization crystallized within her. It was about more than delivering a presentation. It was about building alliances and threading connections through persistence and collaboration. By forming interdisciplinary committees, we can work alongside one another to implement shared goals, she suggested, feeling the weight of responsibility morph into excitement. "It gives us the chance to redefine what we assess as a school and make our pedagogy reflect the values we wish to impart." The discussion that followed was no longer stifled. Rather, it emerged as a chorus of voices wishing to contribute, and she marveled at how the tide had shifted. This was a collective awakening, a shared conviction that inclusive, dynamic learning was possible within their institution. The myriad challenges flashed before her logistical details, potential pushback, but Sarah now felt equipped to confront them head-on. By the end of the meeting, a solid consensus began to form around the integration of her proposal, with some colleagues volunteering to pilot projects in their classrooms. Enthusiasm was palpable, and for the first time, Sarah witnessed the blend of science and spirit as a reality not just her own but theirs as well. Walking out into the crisp evening air, her heart swelled with satisfaction. She felt an unwavering confidence in her identity as an educator rooted in the values of her upbringing yet driven by a determined vision for the world. The tapestry of her past had interwoven perfectly with her future ambitions, creating a narrative vibrant with possibilities. This was more than a personal victory. It was a communal awakening to new ways of knowing and being. The real work lay ahead, but now she possessed the tools and support to foster a lasting change. Sarah knew that she wasn't merely advocating for a curriculum change. She had planted seeds of transformation that would take root in the hearts of her students, our future stewards of the earth. As dusk enveloped her surroundings, Sarah took a moment to reflect on how far she had journeyed. Each perceived setback and confrontation had been essential, not just for her professional development but for her personal evolution. This was her achievement, one that would ripple outward, influencing not just students but entire communities. She stood empowered in her conviction, ready to foster an educational environment where curiosity thrived and everyone felt seen. And that's what making a difference meant. Now, as you contemplate your journey, you need to subscribe now to the channel so you can join Sarah and others like her on a path of meaningful transformation. This is the moment to show your support for authentic stories of overcoming. Leave a like now to help fuel this narrative. Every click truly feeds the algorithm. Don't hold back, comment your thoughts and theories about Sarah's evolution. And most importantly, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who you believe should witness this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. This story is just the beginning.